Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday. We are deep in the midst of our Scott Fishbowl drafts, which we will get to in a minute. And we get to spend the day looking at the NFC North. Plus, we are only a couple weeks away from training camps. Dennis, do you have training camp fever?
I do have training camp fever. Isn't it like next week that the Browns and Jets get to report?
Yeah, I believe they're going first. I know Denver reports the week of the 24th. So in a couple weeks from now, all the teams should be in their camps.
It's going to be glorious.
Yes,
I told Garrett last night on the BSN show, I said, he was like, what are you most looking forward to? And I was like, the Hall of Fame game, because football's back. It won't mean anything for fantasy. Theoretically, it shouldn't, even though last year they played Josh Jacobs. But should be ready to roll. We're running headfirst into football season.
I don't know. It's the Browns and the Jets in the Hall of Fame game, right?
It is.
I wouldn't be surprised if both of them play their starting quarterback for a minute because there's a lot to kind of shake out there. But I don't know if you've been watching it. Just to help salve the time before we can get to those games, Netflix released the new series Quarterback, produced by Peyton Manning. It's a season long. You're following three quarterbacks. The ones they're following this first season, Patrick Mahomes, which unfortunately means we get a dose of Brittany Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, and Marcus Mariota. I don't know. Have you had a chance to check it out?
I have not. When I'm not working or doing shows, I'm prepping for shows and editing articles. And the room where I sit when I do most of my editing, I don't have Netflix. And then when I do go watch Netflix, I'm usually watching something with my wife. We've been watching Suits, so we're in season 2 of Suits. So
I've watched the first 3 of 8 episodes that they dropped down there. And the Marcus Mariota part is probably the most interesting because we obviously, with the season in the rear view, know how that ends, and listening to them talk about how great he is, how great of a leader he is, and how happy that they are to have him there is interesting. I've kind of enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about Kirk Cousins, but probably the hardest thing for me, obviously being a Broncos fan, is this is a complete celebration of the glorious wonder that is Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense, and that's been a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I know something we're all participating in is the Scott Fishbowl. And Dennis, you got to start on last Sunday with the live draft. I believe you said you're in round 19. How's the team?
My 19th round pick earlier today. Yep. The way the scoring's set up, it really favors tight ends, running backs, quarterbacks. And I don't want to say it de-emphasizes wide receivers. It just gives the other positions a substantial boost. And so I went in consciously deciding I was going to try to avoid taking wide receivers early. I picked the 7 spot because I felt like it gave me a chance at one of the elite quarterbacks. And it didn't put me too far back at the end for the 3rd round reversal. So I like the 107. Drafted Justin Herbert. I had Herbert, Lawrence, and Justin Fields on the board when I drafted. It was a tough decision, but looking at it, I was hoping Eckler would make it back to me in the second, and he didn't. He went 3 picks before me. So when it came back around in the second, I went running back, took Jonathan Taylor. And then in the third, I took Josh Jacobs. So I felt like I locked up 2 pretty solid running backs. I know Jacobs is squawking about his contract, and Barkley squawking about his contract, and Eckler squawking about his contract. But in the end, they've got to realize it didn't work for Lev Bell. What makes it think it's going to work for them? So I feel like they'll be in camp. Ended up going Kyle Pitts in the fourth. It's super tight end oriented. Big bonuses for tight ends. Mark Andrews, when Eckler was drafted, I thought maybe I'll go Andrews in the second. He also went before it got back to me. Considered Hawkinson, but I just couldn't pull the trigger at 206 on TJ Hawkinson. He ended up going at, I think, 210. Yeah, 210. So when it came back around and Pitts was there, I feel like he's going to get good volume. I think they're not going to have – they don't have a ton of weapons. Yes, they've got Bijan. Yes, they've got Drake London. And that's pretty much it. And that offense is going to be built around those 3 players. So I felt pretty good with that. Took my second quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, in the 5th round. I think he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got something to prove, and he's got Garrett Wilson to prove it with, and I like that a lot. After that, it was like, well, now I guess I feel like it's time to go wide receiver. So 4 of my next 5 picks were wide receivers, and 3 of the 4 are the wide receiver 1 on their teams, and so I felt really good. Took Amari Cooper, then Terry McLaurin, squeezed another tight end in the middle there with David Njoku, then grabbed Deontay Johnson. In the 9th round, I took Deontay Johnson. I mean, I think that's stealing. And then I was lucky enough, Mike Williams to pair with Justin Herbert came back to me in the 10th. So I felt real good. A.J. Dillon in the 11th, Desmond Ridder in the 12th. Couple more running backs with Tank Bigsby, Devin Singletary. 15th round, it could turn out to be a shit pick, but it could be an amazing pick too. Took Odell Beckham. Like, they're not going to pass a lot, but they're going to try to get him involved just because of his reputation. Then I took Hayden Hurst, Cameron Dicker, Logan Thomas, and then I stupidly picked Curtis Samuel with my 19th rounder. I think Samuel is going to have a decent year. I just don't think that, I like Thomas with this boost in tight end scoring. And as my tight end 4, I think it's a good pick. But then adding Curtis Samuel on top of it. Yes, Sam Howell was my QB1 coming out in that class, but I don't think he's going to be able to really support Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson. So I fudged up.
I just realized when I was looking at mine, I didn't pay very much attention to bye weeks.
Week stacking, huh?
Yeah, well, not intentionally, but apparently. I was pretty excited. Christian McCaffrey dropped to me. I was pick 10, which was great for the reversal, but I had to wait a long time in the first round. I'm kind of like you. Last year I felt like running backs kind of hosed me, and I didn't have as great a luck with quarterbacks, so I kind of hit that a little bit harder. The no negative scoring made that even more probably appealing. So quarterbacks, I'm through. I've made 13 picks. We're halfway through the 13th round. I have 3 quarterbacks so far. I got Dak. I picked up Russell Wilson in the 4th, and then Bryce Young in the 8th. I have Christian McCaffrey was my first round pick. Josh Jacobs, just like you, I took him in the 3rd round. I went and got Javonte Williams in the 7th round, and so far I have also picked up Samaje Perine in the 11th round. Then wide receivers, we actually ended up with more similar players there. I did get Amari Cooper. It was interesting that that pick round came up not too long after we had been talking about the Browns and talking about Watson, looking at his stats, and I thought that was pretty good value. I didn't take a receiver till the 5th. I got him in the 5th and DJ Moore in the 6th, so hoping for some upside. I got Jordan Addison in the 9th, Brandon Cooks in the 10th, and I just picked up Alan Lazard in the 13th. He already has rapport and connection with Rodgers. I know Garrett Wilson's going to be their best receiver, but they have to throw to somebody else occasionally too. I've kind of waited on tight end. I made my first tight end pick in the 12th round. Gerald Everett was the guy that I got. A lot of tight ends went really early. It's been an interesting draft. All of them are a little bit interesting. I did probably 5 or 10 mock drafts, and none of them played out the way people have been going here. A lot of people waited on quarterbacks. Some people waited on running backs for quite a while and just pounded some of the other positions. So it's been interesting to see where players have fallen. I'm pretty happy with my team so far, other than realizing that weeks 7 and 9 are going to be a real bummer for me.
It's funny. I just was looking at the grid view of the draft, and I noticed everybody on mine is 6 and 7, and I started to panic. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute, that's picking the round, not bye weeks. Like literally all 19 players were 6 and 7.
Are you drafting on MFL?
Yeah.
Are you
on Sleeper?
Yeah, I'm on Sleeper, so it's really easy to see bye weeks, and so I feel kind of dumb that I didn't look at them. But that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Well, we are looking at the NFC North. We already have gone through the Vikings, so now we are going to turn our attention to the team that finished second last year, and that is the Detroit Lions. The Lions finished 9-8, second in the NFC North, kind of coming up with that huge Week 18 win on Sunday Night Football over the Green Bay Packers. Wasn't enough to get them into the playoffs, but it was a pretty fun game to watch. Key additions this offseason, they picked up David Montgomery at running back. They picked up Marvin Jones at wide receiver, Cameron Sutton at cornerback, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson at safety, and Emmanuel Mosley at cornerback. So you can see kind of trying to rebuild that secondary as they look to make a run here. Key losses, DeAndre Swift left and headed to the Eagles. Jamal Williams left and headed to the Saints. Those were their top 2 rushers last year. Jeff Okudah, cornerback, is gone, went to the Falcons. DJ Chark, wide receiver, went to the Panthers. In the draft, they scooped up Jahmyr Gibbs at running back. Pretty excited to see him play this year. They got Sam Laporta at tight end, and they also got an interesting linebacker in Jack Campbell with their first couple of picks. Key fantasy assets, Jared Goff is their quarterback. He finished as quarterback 10 last year. At running back, they have Jahmyr Gibbs, the rookie. He obviously didn't play last year. Pretty excited, though. David Montgomery, who came over from the Bears, finished as RB24. Among the wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown finished as wide receiver 7. Jameson Williams only got a couple of games in there, didn't get a whole lot of activity in his rookie year as he recovered from injury, and will actually start with a 6-game suspension this year. He is a wide receiver. Marvin Jones was actually wide receiver 56 for the Jaguars last year, and Josh Reynolds was wide receiver 68 right in Detroit. At tight end, Sam Laporta, the rookie, a lot of expectations for him at tight end. Brock Wright was there last year, finished as tight end 38, and Shane Zylstra was tight end 50. Those two guys took over and kind of split the reps at the position after TJ Hawkinson was traded to Minnesota. So, Dennis, what are your fantasy expectations for the Lions, and what do you think of this new backfield of Gibbs and Montgomery?
So dynasty drafters are drunk on Jahmyr Gibbs. The dynasty nerds, they got Gibbs going off the board as RB7, Montgomery going off the board at RB32. I think they're going to – I'm not going to be the least bit surprised if David Montgomery outscores Jahmyr Gibbs. Just because he's a veteran, he is not going to be prone to mistakes. He isn't going to make rookie mistakes. He is a good pass receiver and good pass protector. No, he's not as explosive as Jahmyr Gibbs. And yes, running back is an easy spot for rookies to step into and take off. But we saw last year what they like to do with the split backs. And no, I don't think David Montgomery's going to score. What did Jamal Williams score? 17 touchdowns, 18, 19 touchdowns.
Yeah, 17 touchdowns.
A lot of touchdowns. But it wouldn't surprise me if Montgomery has 12 touchdowns and he's had what RB4 season, and everything else has been kind of middling RB2, high end RB2. I think he's going to be back in that range again. It wouldn't surprise me to see Montgomery at RB somewhere between RB10 and 14, because this Lions offense has a really, really good offensive line. The wide receiver group is going to lean heavily on Amon-Ra St. Brown. They don't have right now it's Marvin Jones back for another stint, Josh Reynolds, and waiting for Jameson Williams to come off a suspension. I'm a little nervous about Sam Laporta. I don't think I'm investing in Sam Laporta yet. I have been notably vocal anti-rookie tight end for probably a couple years now. I think unless they are a unicorn like Kyle Pitts, I think you just wait. And I don't think Sam Laporta falls into the Kyle Pitts category. So I'm going to let other people draft him. And then when he disappoints, next year, next offseason somewhere, I'll scoop in and get him at a reasonable price. And I get they're the cheapest they ever are when you are spending second, third, and fourth round rookie picks on them. But I don't know. I'd rather spend a little more for a tight end that I know can play in the NFL. So I'll wait on Laporta. Goff is the other one. He's going off in Dynasty Nerds ADP as QB 18. I think that feels right for Dynasty. Will he outperform this year? He's got a good shot to, but he also is, he's like late stage Ben Roethlisberger, where he's really good at home, but not so good on the road. He's going to have to even some of that out. The improvements they've made on defense may very well allow that to happen for him to be a little more consistent on the road. Jack Campbell should be a really good playmaker. They drafted Aiden Hutchinson last year. They've got some weapons, and Ben Johnson turned down opportunities to be a head coach to come back and work with this team again. I think they could be really exciting on the offensive side of the ball. And if Goff finishes as QB 12 or 14, I won't be the least bit surprised. Amon-Ra going off the board. I think wide receiver 7. I think that's good value for him. And I'm not buying Gibbs in startups at RB6 though. I'm a little off. I'd rather have Montgomery at 4 times, 5 times cheaper.
Yeah, and the Fantasy Pros ADP is a little bit different, but you're right. Goff, QB 16. Gibbs there is going off at RB 13, which if you're looking at redraft too, which, Fantasy Pros starting to mix in, there are quite a few people that are already starting to pound redraft season. That's even more high, especially not knowing exactly how things are going to shake out. We thought they brought in David Montgomery, who signed to a 3-year deal for decent enough money to be somewhat of that, red zone battering ram. His makes a little more sense. He was RB24 last year. He's going at about RB25. I still think Gibbs probably the more explosive player, but Montgomery's going to play and have a role. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. His ADP is right in line with what his production was. To me, I don't know what to make of Jameson Williams. I gather people don't either, because an ADP of wide receiver 50 would tell you there's some trepidation. We didn't get to see much last year. And when he was on the field, he wasn't really heavily featured at the end of last year, only had a couple of receptions, not enough at all to get a sense of how it's going to work. And then starting with the 6-game suspension this year, I was excited to see him get a full off season and go into a full season and be that kind of complimentary receiver. And you're not going to get to see that at the jump. So I'm not sure what to expect this year. The one ADP I was sort of blown away. You mentioned Sam Laporta and how you feel about rookie tight ends. Tight end 19 is where he's going right now with Fantasy Pros ADP. That feels pretty high. I don't know exactly what we're going to see, from Laporta in this offense. The other ADP is kind of interesting, but Matt, how do you feel about this Detroit Lions offense and this backfield now of Gibbs and Montgomery?
I mean, I think it's going to be fairly exciting if I'm being honest. I'm pretty bullish on Detroit this year. I feel like we all like them last year. We all picked them to make the playoffs. I feel like we did. I mean, Jared Goff, I think, kind of reminded us just how good he can be in a structured offense with weapons around him and a good offensive line. And I think Gibbs has a chance to be what Detroit wanted Swift to be. I mean, Swift was very productive and he was good when he wasn't injured, right? Like when he was healthy and on the field, he played really well. And I think Gibbs, arguably, it's hard to say is the better running back because I'm almost positive I actually had DeAndre Swift graded ahead of Jonathan Taylor in their draft class. So, I mean, I thought very highly of DeAndre Swift. He was a very, very good running back coming out of Georgia. But what Gibbs can do as a receiving back, I don't think it's understated to say is better than Swift as a receiving back, and he was good at that. So I think he has a chance to just open up this offense to a completely different level. I'm excited to see what it ends up looking like. I think it's fairly easy to say that they're probably going to be the best offense, or maybe it's not because, well, I know I'm higher on Minnesota than you two are. I think that they could be the best offense in the NFC North and arguably a top 5 offense in the NFC in general.
Did Dynasty Nerds start up ADP for Jameson Williams as wide receiver 32? So, you know, that they're buying him in Dynasty still. But Laporta, you thought 19 was something? Tight end 11 in the Dynasty Nerds ADP.
There's just some people that think he's going to be the new TJ Hawkinson, maybe. But I'd like to see a little first. So I mentioned a couple of the ADPs. So did Dennis. Matt, do you have a favorite fantasy value for the Lions?
Man. What's I was going to say David Montgomery, but RB25, that's not a discount at all. Man, I don't know. I hate to say this. I mean, I know Dennis just mentioned Dynasty Nerds has his ADP at tight end 11, but Fantasy Pros has him at 19. I think Laporta might be the one. I mean, I don't think that he is TJ Hawkinson athletic, but I do think he is a very, very good tight end. I think people are excited about him because we've seen how productive Iowa tight ends have been when they get to the NFL, and he is coming from that tree and lineage, and they've just done a great job of producing tight ends. I don't think he's quite up there with like the George Kittles, Noah Fant, and TJ Hawkinsons of the world, but I don't think he's a massive step down from those guys. My big fear is going to be, we just mentioned none of us think he's not TJ Hawkinson, right? Well, I couldn't figure out how to use TJ Hawkinson, so I'm a little bit worried if they can use a lesser version of him in this offense. But at the tight end position, I do think that it's a hard position to find that top guy for. So I'm willing to take a shot on him at tight end 19 because I don't even know what is that overall. That's got to be low. People aren't drafting tight ends very high, so he probably might be the guy I'd go for. I like the ADP on Jameson Williams. My big fear with him is pretty much missed all of last year due to the injury. Now he's going to miss the first 6 weeks. And I believe with the suspension, you can't even be practicing with the team either. So now we're talking about the first 6 weeks of the season, not being able to practice and not being with the team. Now he's coming back again late in the season and trying to make his way onto this team. He's a very talented player, but we've seen sometimes talent may not matter when it comes to just who's gelling with the quarterback and the offense. I'm hesitant on what I think Jameson Williams is really going to be at the NFL level.
You know, for me, the value, I think, lies in Jared Goff, and it's short term. It's this season. If he's going off, if you're getting him at QB 18, QB 16, that is, I feel like he's QB 12 is 12, 13, 14 is where he is. Is it a big discount? No, but he's going to be startable as your QB 1 for probably a third of the season, and he'll be very viable, a top-end QB2 for Superflex leagues. I think he would be probably my best value. Montgomery, I think he's a value as well because he's going to be behind the best offensive line he's played behind in his entire career. And I know that they've got Gibbs there, who's also going to be behind that line. But I think Montgomery leads the team in carries. He leads the team in rushing yards. He leads the team in rushing touchdowns as well. And he's going to have a piece of the passing game because he's good at it.
It is tempting to go with one of the running backs because if you looked at Williams and Swift combined, they combined for 361 carries, 1,604 yards, 22 rushing touchdowns, 60 receptions, and 3 passing touchdowns. That is a lot of production that now gets to get replaced by those two guys. But I am going to go a little bit different. Marvin Jones, he went back for a reason. He's maybe not the sexiest pick, but you're getting him at wide receiver 91 right now. And especially if you're just looking for a veteran to patch, and he's going to be there probably wide receiver 2 to start the year. And if last year Khalif Raymond could see 64 targets and get 47 passes for 616 yards, I feel like Marvin Jones could settle into a nice role there. And we still don't entirely know what Williams is going to look like when he comes back and how long it's going to take him to incorporate in there. What is his rapport with Jared Goff, really? I mean, they don't have very much in-game rapport. Maybe they'll be able to build some up during the preseason before he goes on suspension. But the Lions are a team to me that have some aspirations, and they're going to be looking to kind of get that going. Dennis, I'll come back to you first. How do you feel the Lions are going to do this year?
I've got them winning the division, going 11-6. I think their defense takes a big step, and while it's probably not a good enough defense to make a deep playoff run, it's good enough to give them the title for the NFC North, and that offense will get them there.
Yeah, I'm 11-6, 10-7. I think the problem is they have some pretty good out of conference opponents, and the Ravens, the Broncos, the Chiefs, the Chargers. Like that's a pretty good group of teams to be playing, especially if the Ravens bounce back the way I think they can. I do think that getting the NFC South is going to help them. I wouldn't be surprised if they win all 4 of those games. And obviously, we'll talk obviously here in a minute about Green Bay and Chicago. I don't know how good either one of those teams may be this year overall. I think Chicago could take a step forward, but I don't know if they're going to be a good team overall. So those could be some easy wins. I do think I'm obviously a little bit higher on the Vikings, as I mentioned earlier, than you two are. They're going to have to play them twice. So I think there's a potential for like 6 to 7 losses. So I'll go with Dennis because I think I put the Vikings at 10-7, and I do think the Lions win the division this year, so I'll give them a 1-game bump. I feel like we're giving everybody 10s and 7s and 11 and 6s, so it's gonna be really interesting.
But that was practically how first of all, we haven't hit the NFC or the AFC South, and I guarantee that there won't be some uniformity. Yeah, there was a lot of parity in the middle. Yeah, there was a lot of teams between 8 and 10 wins last year.
I just feel like every team I've given so far, we've done like 12 teams, and I feel like every team I've done, I'm like, they're gonna be like 11-7, 10-6.
If you give the Packers 10 or 11 wins, they'll start to.
We'll see. I haven't looked at their schedule yet, but we're about to.
I'm right there. I had 10, 11 wins for the Lions. I think they win the division as well. Well, we just mentioned the Packers. The Packers finished as the 3rd place team last year, so we will roll right on to them. They finished as 8-9, losing that decisive last game to finish 3rd in the NFC North. Ended up being Aaron Rodgers' final game as a Packer. They did not have a lot of big key additions. They got Jonathan Owens as safety. They had quite a few notable players leave the team. Aaron Rodgers went to the Jets. Quarterback Alan Lazard, probably their most experienced wide receiver, went to the Jets. Randall Cobb, veteran wide receiver, also went to the Jets. Adrian Amos, safety, also went to the Jets. They might as well just traded half their roster to the Jets. Robert Tonyan, the tight end, went to the Bears. So at least he went somewhere different. They did a lot of drafting of offensive skill position players, as you would expect they might need. They got Jaden Reed at wide receiver. They got Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft at tight end. Dontavian Wicks and Grant DeBose, wide receivers, and Lou Nichols III at running back. Key fantasy assets, it is Jordan Love time. He finished as quarterback 66 in some limited appearances last year. The one place that they do have some good players coming back is running back. Aaron Jones was running back 9 last year. A.J. Dillon was running back 16. Their wide receiving core is young. Their top 3 guys are either first or second year players. Christian Watson finished as wide receiver 41 last year. Romeo Doubs finished as wide receiver 71. And I mentioned Jaden Reed is there as a rookie. Tight ends, probably their top 2 projected tight ends would be rookies Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. So, Matt, I'll start with you. What are your fantasy expectations for the Packers, and particularly Jordan Love in his first year as a starter?
Oh, that's the $1 million question, right? That's why everybody's tuning in to find out exactly what to think of this offense, and I honestly don't know. We've seen 2 versions of Jordan Love. So if you've seen the Utah State quarterback coming out of college, you would say reminds you a lot of one Malik Willis we saw come out last year, not to particularly play well for Tennessee Titans. But I do think over the past couple of years, as he's gotten into starts, I feel like he's been progressively better. I believe he played for a little bit as a rookie, did not look good. But then last year, and I think it was the Chiefs game, he didn't have a great game, but I thought he looked a lot better than I expected him to, especially against a good Chiefs team. This offense is going to solely come down to just how good he is. I mean, they have, as you mentioned, not just Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon. Like, I actually think this wide receiver core, like, I'm pretty sure we rated it as like the one of the worst ones in the NFC, but there's a lot of upside there. And Christian Watson was a first round pick. Romeo Doubs, who played really well at times for them last year, could be a good wide receiver.
Watson was the second round pick.
Okay, sorry, second round pick. Jaden Reed, though, who is a guy that was getting high end draft buzz last year, comes back to school for one more year. Also, I think going to be a very good wide receiver. And then Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, I think, are both very intriguing tight end options. Both have a lot of upside. They need to kind of realize that upside, but it's there. So this team has a lot of offensive weapons that could be very good. It's all going to rely on Jordan Love. I hate to like sit on the fence here. I don't think he's a top asset. I also don't think he's like a bottom like quarterback 28 to 32. I do think he's going to be a decent quarterback. Maybe some of this comes from the belief I have in Matt LaFleur and this offense. You know, I know there's been all the reports of, this was Aaron Rodgers' offense and Aaron Rodgers did this and that. And that may be true. But again, I thought Jordan Love played fairly well in the games that he was in. I think Matt LaFleur is going to balance this offense out more. We heard all the time, whether the rumors were true or not, that at times, if Matt LaFleur called for a running play and Aaron Rodgers wanted to pass it, he was checking to a passing play. Well, that's not Matt LaFleur's offense. That is, at that point, Aaron Rodgers' offense. I think LaFleur will balance this offense out a little bit more and highlight Jordan Love's strengths and try and hide his weaknesses. But I do think this is going to be a growing year for him. I think overall he's probably going to finish closer to like QB 18 to 22. I think he's going to be a QB2, not a high-end one, but I do think he'll be a viable QB2 option because he does bring you some rushing upside. But when it comes to the weapons, I do think the wide receivers will struggle because of that, because I don't think it's going to be a ton of passing offense. I think this is going to be the year. If you have Aaron Jones or AJ Dillon, and you're looking to make a push for your fantasy championship, you're looking for that guy who's RB2, maybe has RB1 upside, I think this is the year to go all in for those guys because I think it's going to be the year of them.
Yeah, the Packers passing game is a real conundrum because it's Jordan Love who is he's going into his fourth year. He's been
fourth year.
Yeah. And then a bunch of first and second year guys at wide receiver and tight end. Dillon's been there for 3 years now. Aaron Jones has been there for 6 or 7. Jones still has a lot in the tank. I don't know if that offense is built to just pound the ball, mostly from the offensive line perspective. Love only completed just over 61% of his passes for his college career. He's going to have to bump that up, I think, to make this work and be, a high-end QB2, I think. He does have some good mobility. But the conundrum is, how is this young core going to gel? Will they lift each other up to the point where it's just a bunch of kids rallying around each other? And when you get that lightning in a bottle situation, it could really turn into something. Watson's going off in Dynasty as wide receiver 21. That's pretty aggressive. But I do think he's the wide receiver 1 there. I think so. Could he outpace that by 10 spots? He could. It depends on how much they spread the ball around. I think that's going to be the real question. Jaden Reed, wide receiver 49, going off ahead of Romeo Doubs at wide receiver 63. Now, these are the Dynasty Nerds, Dynasty ADP. It's absurd that Romeo Doubs is wide receiver 63, 14 spots behind Jaden Reed. I just think Doubs is probably a better receiver and a more athletic receiver. So that's screaming, roll the dice on Dobbs there. If you can get Dobbs at that kind of value. Tight end is going to be weird. Matt, I know you like Tucker Kraft as being the more athletic tight end, more of the receiving tight end. But Musgrave also is no slouch. He just has had, I think he's had lots of injuries in his career. But it also, you don't find a lot of tight ends that are real viable as a rookie. We've had a couple recently, and that, makes us want to keep trying to catch lightning in a bottle. I don't know that we're going to get a lot out of the tight ends. Maybe last year I was a year early on the A.J. Dillon breakout. So maybe this year it is. And, we get to see an offense like Austin Eckler wants to be in, where you've got that big back carrying the ball and then Aaron Jones catching a bunch of passes. Jones is a phenomenal pass receiver. He's great at getting in the end zone. He's a good running back as well, but he's 27, 28 years old now, and he's not the biggest guy. There is some potential, but, the price, Jones at RB 26 in Dynasty, Dillon at RB 37. I feel like those are probably appropriately priced. I don't know. I just struggle with seeing Romeo Doubs at wide receiver 63. I think Love, I agree with you, Matt. He's probably more of a mid QB2 than a low end QB2 or QB3.
Yeah, we think of the Packers with Aaron Rodgers as being kind of a high volume pass offense, but that wasn't really the case last year. Jones and Dillon combined for 399 carries and almost 1,900 rushing yards. Aaron Rodgers did not throw for 4,000 yards, only had 26 passing touchdowns, finished as quarterback 13. I don't think you're way off base saying Love could end up being, like quarterback 18 to 20 range. The question is really how this whole offense is going to come together, but I think they're a run-first team. I feel like that's what Matt LaFleur has wanted them to be anyway, and that's kind of what they were last year. A.J. Dillon got 186 carries, so it's not like he wasn't a huge part of it. Jones got a few more at 213, but they were pretty close there. They also got a lot of targets. I think those two guys are going to be a real focal point, at least early in the offense. But to me, that might make some of the value being some of those younger receivers. Tucker Kraft, we mentioned the Fantasy Pros has him at tight end 45. If he ends up being a better passing option, that could be a value. And Fantasy Pros has Jaden Reed right now going as wide receiver 73. And Romeo Doubs is wide receiver 54. I like taking a chance on any of those guys a little bit more than trying to pay up for Christian Watson. Not that I think he'll be bad, but the value I like at the back end there. Dennis, what is the value you like the best out of Green Bay? You're muted.
You're muted, Dennis.
So for me, it's Romeo Doubs based on the Dynasty Nerds ADP. Wide receiver 63. I feel like he finishes at least 20 spots ahead of that. I think he's going to be a good wide receiver 4 this year. And that's a flex-worthy player most weeks. So I like Romeo Doubs a lot.
Man, I really think it's going to end up being, as Matt mentioned, the running backs. I mean, I like Dobbs as well, but and maybe this was Aaron Rodgers. It's going to be, it's so hard to tell with this offense because Christian Watson out targeted him once he came back and healthy. I mean, he was getting 8, 7, 6, 7, 8, 9, and Dubs was not getting that many targets toward the end of the year. Dubs flashed really early on when Watson was out, but it really seemed like when Watson came back, he was kind of dominating as that wide receiver one with Allen Lazard. Matt, you mentioned just like how many carries and targets and everything these running backs got. I mean, 213 attempts for Aaron Jones, 186 for A.J. Dillon, but then 72 targets for Aaron Jones and 43 for A.J. Dillon. Maybe that's an Aaron Rodgers thing. I think it's a Matt LaFleur thing because Jordan Love was still dumping off as well when he played in those games. As crazy it is to say this, because A.J. Dillon is going off, at least to fantasy pros, I think he's running back 30-something, like 32. I think he clearly outshoots that. I think he's probably in RB2 and fairly comfortably. But to me, it's Aaron Jones. I mean, RB16, I would not be surprised if we're again looking at this guy as RB. Matt, you said he finishes RB9 last year. I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes as that or better, and you're getting him at RB16. You're getting him at almost a low-end RB2 price for a guy who's likely going to be an RB1 in this offense because I just think they're going to rely so heavily on them. And even if they get behind in games, we've seen Aaron Jones is the guy out there in the hurry-up offense where they're not afraid to dump it off to him. And I do feel like if Dubs is struggling to get open and Christian Watson's going deep, that's what Jordan Love is going to do. If he's getting pressured in the pocket, he's either going to dump off to one of those tight ends or dump off to Aaron Jones. While I like Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, I don't know that I see either one of them stepping forward and being major players in the offense this year. I want to give them a year, especially Tucker Kraft coming up from the FCS levels. I do think he's the better tight end, but we've just seen these players struggle to go from FCS to NFL. It's just, they talk about, we had Archie Griffin on, whatever that was that 3 years ago now at this point, 4 years ago? I always see the thing come up, the memory come up. He told us on there, because I asked him, I was like, what's the difference of going up? He said the game gets faster going up to college and even faster going up to the NFL. Well, that's what Tucker Kraft is doing. Tucker Kraft is technically jumping 2 levels. He skipped the Power 5 and G5 level altogether and is going straight to the NFL. It's going to be really fast game for him to try and learn. I think he can do it. I don't think he does it this year, so I'm going with Aaron Jones, even with him being RB16 off the board.
We mentioned Packers, kind of a young team, new era with Aaron Rodgers gone. How do you think they finish?
Man, if I had any feel for how I really thought this team was going to be, you say you were going to, choke me through the camera here if I said they have 10 wins. I don't think they're going to get to 10. I don't think they're going to be as bad. They have a very favorable schedule.
I didn't say I would choke you. I just said I'd start to get concerned about you.
Gotcha. I mean, Chargers, Chiefs, obviously those in my opinion will be 2 tough losses, but after that, it's just the Steelers. They get the NFC South. They don't really have like the Raiders. I think they could beat the Raiders. I mean, the Bears obviously going to play the Vikings and the Lions, so those could be a couple losses. I think they're going to end up being probably 7-10, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're one of those teams that, because I do think Matt LaFleur is a good coach, and I do think this defense is still going to be good, that they're one of those teams that's like fighting toward the end of the year. Like they're still technically in, quote unquote, the playoff hunt and finish as like an 8-9 team or whatever. But I think they're probably going to finish 7-10. I think 7-10. I was going to say 6-11. I'll stick with 7-10. I think they can get to 7 wins.
Man, I thought you were going to, you sound like you were going to go a lot higher. I was like, man, I
wanted to, but
I got them at 6-11. I think they lose to the Bears opening week. I think Chicago gets them at home. I've got them going 2-4 in the division. They're a young team outside of a couple offensive linemen and the running backs. They've got some holes on defense that they need to shore up. And the offense is just, I think LaFleur has a good plan for offense, but there's no substitute for experience. And he just has a lot of inexperienced guys on that offense, including the trigger man, Jordan Love. Yes, he's been there, but he hasn't played. And when he played in college, he wasn't super accurate. So will they get there? Like next year, could I see him being a lot better? Sure. Things will sort out. They've got a lot of young guys. I've got them going 6-11.
I think there's going to be growing pains. I think a lot of it comes down to whether you think Jordan Love's going to take off right away. And I don't, in part because they just have, even though he's been there for a few years, they just have not given him any real chances, or Aaron Rodgers hasn't really provided any real chances. Last year, he threw the ball 21 times in the regular season. That is not enough to have any idea of what he is going to be. He came off the bench in one game against the Chiefs and looked pretty good in a short stretch. But we just haven't seen enough. They were only an 8-win team last year with a pretty strong veteran core. I think they're a top 5 pick this year. I have them in the 3 to 5 win range. And it's not because I don't think there's potential later, but we've seen a lot of these teams that are fun to watch. I mean, even the Bears last year were fun to watch. They only won 4 games. To get the young group going, to get them going on the same page, I think there'll probably be a lot of close losses, but a lot of losses for the Packers. That brings us to the final team in the NFC North, and that is the Chicago Bears. Last year, they were 3-14. Actually, they were. Yeah, that's right. That's 17 games. 3-14, finished 4th in the NFC North. Key additions this offseason, they picked up DJ Moore at wide receiver, Donta Foreman at running back, Tremaine Edmonds at linebacker, and Robert Tonyan at tight end. Key losses, David Montgomery, the running back, went to the Lions. Their backup quarterback, Trevor Siemian, went to the Bengals, and their tackle, Riley Reiff, went to the Patriots. In the draft, they took Darnell Wright, a tackle. They got Roschon Johnson to add to the group at running back, and they took a wide receiver in Tyler Scott. Key fantasy assets, Justin Fields was quarterback 6 last year. In the backfield, they have a trio led by Khalil Herbert, who was running back 41 last year. Donta Foreman was running back 38 in Carolina last year, and Roschon Johnson, the rookie, joins that group at wide receiver. DJ Moore was wide receiver 24, also in Carolina last year. Darnell Mooney finished as wide receiver 72. Chase Claypool, who came over mid-season, finished as wide receiver 67, and then they added the rookie Tyler Scott. At tight end, they have Cole Kmet, who finished as tight end 8, and Robert Tonyan, who finished as tight end 20 for the Packers last year. So, Matt, I know you've been excited about Justin Fields. What do you expect from him this year with a better set of passing options?
Well, I'm hoping that he takes a step forward in the passing game. Obviously, last year had a chance to break the rushing record for quarterbacks, which I think would have been a cool thing for him. Obviously, he ended up getting beaten up and wasn't able to do that, and I think that's because he is running the ball so much, and I hope that they figure out a way to open this up a little bit more and let him pass. We saw at Ohio State that he is a good passer. He does have a little bit of a elongated throwing motion, which probably it sounds like is one of the issues he's having at the NFL level. But overall, I think he is an incredible quarterback. They added the weapons around him. What's unfortunate for him, I think, is bringing in, as good as DJ Moore is, a lot of this team was there last year, so you get that second-year step up in the offense, but now they're arguably probably wide receiver 1 was not. So while he's learning the new offense, the rest of this team, in my opinion, is taking that step forward as a second year in the offense. I do think that they're going to be good. I think they're going to be better. They improve the offensive line a little bit, which I think is going to help out Justin Fields. But to me, it's really just going to come down to what this passing game can be, because if they're just going to rely on Justin Fields' legs and not let him be a passer, I think you're going to be looking at another 3-win team. Like they have to open up the game passing at the end of the day.
I think that they've telegraphed their intention to open it up. I just don't know how open is. Like, they threw the ball 377 times last year, which was last in the league by a lot. I think, they're likely to throw the ball 477 times this year. And that feels like a huge jump, but it still is at the bottom of NFL attempts. You know what? That would put them right about 4th fewest in the league. So, they brought in DJ Moore. I'm not buying it, but there are a lot of people in on Cole Kmet this year as a receiving threat. Darnell Mooney will be back. He missed several games last year. He provides a deep element that is going to pair well, I think, with DJ Moore. Their running back room is a little bit conflicting because they got some guys that I think we like Deontay Foreman. Because of his injury, I think we all are pulling for him. But I think there's a real chance he doesn't even make the team. If Roschon Johnson shows well, Foreman could be in jeopardy. Now, the guy I like is Khalil Herbert. He had 731 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns last year. He didn't get a lot of opportunity in the passing game, so there is potential for him to grow there. But I think he leads the team in rushing this year because he's got something that Roschon Johnson and Deontay Foreman don't, and that's explosiveness. So I think he's going to get opportunity. And I don't think we should be surprised if Khalil Herbert is the starter coming out of camp. Foreman is going to have a role if he makes the team. He's that short yardage back. He kind of is going to push people out of the way. Roschon Johnson, he's a rookie. His niche is the passing game. He's got Deontay Foreman size and passing game chops. Can he put it together at the NFL level? I don't know. This team, I agree with Matt. They can't just rely on Justin Fields to run the ball. Fields is coming off the board in Fantasy Pros as QB6, Dynasty Nerds QB8. So in Dynasty, we're a little less bullish on him. I think because we look at what happens with running quarterbacks, and I don't know that we're necessarily believing that Justin Fields can take that next step and completely transition to a much higher volume passing game. If he can get over 500 attempts, 525 attempts, and be successful with it, I think that would be phenomenal. I think the Bears offense might be practically unstoppable if Fields is completing 65% of his passes on 525 attempts. With his running, the running game in general, and Matt Eberflus, he was a defensive wizard in Indianapolis. They didn't hire him for his offensive prowess. He's going to put that Bears defense together. I like what the Bears are doing, but I don't think this is going to be the year.
Yeah, the thing that makes me laugh is Tunyon, who probably his breakout season was because of some insane efficiency in terms of receptions versus targets, turning them into touchdowns. Looking at Cole Kmet last year, that would be an apt description. He only saw 69 targets, but he caught 50 of them for 544 yards and 7 touchdowns. But that 69 targets did make him the leader of that Bears offense. So a little bit interesting. I'm kind of with you, Dennis. Looking at the ADPs of the running backs, you can tell people are not sure what to make of it. Herbert's going as 40 on Fantasy Pros, Johnson going as 49, Foreman going as 52. I like Khalil Herbert. He was very explosive last year, 5.7 yards per carry. He's done that the last couple of years. I think that's one of the reasons they were comfortable letting David Johnson move on. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. Dennis, what is your pick for best fantasy value?
It's Khalil Herbert for me. He's coming off the board in Dynasty Nerds ADP at RB41, Fantasy Pros ADP at RB40. I feel like he wins that job, and he's going to be the lead back there. I think he's got top 25 upside to him.
Yeah, it's Herbert for me. I was high on him coming out as a rookie. I really thought he had a chance to take over this backfield even when Montgomery was there. He played well when Montgomery got hurt. He is coming off the board, as Matt, you mentioned, for Fantasy Pros as running back 40. I mean, you mentioned everybody's kind of confused on what to do with this backfield, and you have to take your shot because Herbert's coming off at 40, Roschon at 49, and then Donta Foreman at 52. Maybe you can get Herman and Foreman if you go for it, but chances are someone's going to end up with different team's going to end up with each of those guys on their roster. I think Herbert is the better player. I think he's got more burst than any of those guys. He's a good receiving back, and I do think he's got really good vision. I think everybody's popping up Roschon Johnson because he's a shiny new toy. I think he's just a glorified pass blocking back. He is not a good running back. I think people got excited because he had a couple good games this last year in Texas, but I just don't think he's anything special personally. I think it's going to be a split between Herbert and Foreman. To be honest with you, I mean, Foreman has looked better and better since coming back from that Achilles injury, and he brings something that neither one of those other two can, and that is tough running up the middle. Roschon Johnson is a tough runner. Go look at the times that he got tackled from behind and how many times he fumbled the ball, though. Like, Roschon Johnson struggled with some fumbles in college. I think that it's going to be between Herbert and Foreman personally, and I think Herbert's the better player. To get him at RB40, I think there's a realistic shot he's a high-end RB2, and I'm talking right around like RB15 this year, even with as bad as we think the Bears' offense could be. So he is an easy buy for me, and I think the best get in this offense. The other one I will mention really quick, and I don't even know where he's going in ADP, and I know people are probably – so like if you're listening to this while you're driving, just pull over now because I don't need you to wreck your car. Maybe Matt, you can look this up because I'm not even seeing it. I'm scrolling through. I found him. Going off the board at wide receiver 160, Velus Jones. And I know that's going to sound crazy. They brought over DJ Moore. Darnell Mooney plays a very specific role in this offense. The Bears front office and team are already talking about how they're pretty much done with Chase Claypool and his attitude and everything. Velus Jones has spent the offseason working out with Justin Fields. He knows the offense going into his second year. All the reports were that was the guy Justin Fields wanted, right? I wouldn't be surprised if he's the guy that they take those big plays to. And while this is very much an apples to bananas comparison. We saw what Chris Olave was able to do as that deep threat in the Ohio State offense. If they use Velus Jones that way, he's going to outproduce 160 value. I'm not telling you to draft him and put him in as like your wide receiver 2 every single week. I'm just saying, if he ends up finishing as like a high-end wide receiver 4, in some of the formats we play in, that's going to be valuable for getting him as literally your last pick.
All right, man. How do the Bears finish?
Oh, they're going to finish like 4-13. I hate saying that because I think that could really kind of question if they finish that bad. We are going to be talking about if Justin Fields is unfortunately their future. And I think, even if Fields plays well, they could still overall be a very bad team. Maybe they're able to get to 5 wins. So I'll be nice and say that they're 5-12. They improve a little bit, but I don't see. This team just has so many questions, not just on offense, but on defense as well. I just don't know how they compete for a playoff spot. And I think they're going to be the worst team in the division, unfortunately.
I'm a little more bullish on them. I've got them at 8-9. They are going to be facing some challenges. Like I said earlier, I think they're going to beat Green Bay in the opener at home. But they're going to lose next week on the road at Tampa Bay. Then they got the Chiefs, and they, don't hate me, Matt, but I got them beating the Broncos in Chicago. But then losing to Washington and D.C., beating the Vikings at home, beating the Raiders at home. I think, would I be surprised if they win 5 games instead of 8? No. But I think that their offense is going to take a step. And they've put some players in place, adding another offensive lineman, bringing over DJ Moore. Yes, they need help on defense, but they've got a defensive-minded coach that I think is going to get he's going to get some stuff out of that offense. So I'm bullish at 8-9, not making the playoffs.
I'm more bullish than Matt. I think they get, but not quite as much as Dennis. So I guess in this scenario, I'm Baby Bear. I was just right. I have them 6 or 7 wins. I think they can take a step forward. I don't think they're quite there in playoff range yet. And I agree with Matt. There are a lot of questions about this team and still probably a lot of things they've got to build on. That'll do it for the NFC North this week. Dennis, other people are going to have free time, but Peter would like you to know that there's still something you have to do this weekend. But if you're not like you and you don't have this task hanging over them, what can they do?
Well, they can hit the download button. They can subscribe, give us a rating and a review Oh, and by the way, if you haven't already gotten your tickets for the Fantasy Football Expo coming up the weekend of August 12th, get them. We're going to have a great time there at the Expo. Lots of fantasy football people, live drafting going on. Some of the biggest names in the industry will be there. It's definitely a great time up there in Canton.
Well, that'll do it for us this week. Next week, the show takes a turn to the south, literally, as we will go to the AFC South looking at the Jaguars and the Titans on Monday. So stay tuned for that. Until then, have a great weekend.